Are we on here? All right, here we are, episode 213. What's new with Quarkus Chappie, the Quarkus Assistant? We figure out how to click the right button to get us back here on the screen. There we go. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I don't even know what time it is for you, Philip. Where is it? Like middle of the night?
11 p.m. Yeah, 11 p.m.
Wow.
Could be worse. I was afraid it was going to be like 2 a.m.
No, that would be like what, Japan or Singapore or something.
Yeah, if our clocks change in the summer winter change, usually it would have been now 1 o'clock. Yeah. Because I lose 2 hours. Yeah.
Cool. All right, do we got any news, Holly?
I don't think so, but I'll push the button just for our our minor news, which is that CR1 for 325 was cut last week, and the platform version of 325 should be coming out this week. So sort of progress continuing to tick along there with the monthly releases.
Awesome. Lots of cool stuff going on. So what are we going to talk about today? AI, of course. It seems to be what everybody's talking about these days, right?
Yeah, should I go?
Yeah, go for it. That's
yeah.
Shall we bring up your slides?
Yeah, you can bring up my slides. So the last time that I was on Insights, I kind of touched at the end of my session, which was more about dev improvements or dev usability improvements. I touched on what I was working on then, which was Chappie. So this is kind of showing that again. It feels to me like from a user's perspective, not much has changed since then, although it was quite a while ago. But what has changed is how it's structured so that extension developers can take part. So I'm going to kind of show a whole bunch of stuff from a user's perspective, but also code from a extension developer's perspective, how they can take part in this assistant. I'm going to do my slides like this. I'm not going to go slideshow because I'm going to switch between them quite a lot. Is that okay? Or should I go like big screen like this?
I think it depends on what's on the slide. If it's like text that people want to read, probably presentation would be better.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. So the first thing I want to talk about is the dev workspace. So initially in the POC of Chappie, a lot of the stuff that we've done with the assistant was based on something in your workspace, like a file, like add JavaDoc to your file or add a text to this file or something like that. So when I built the screens for this, they kind of all had the same browser that you can browse your items with to do this AI action on, or this assistant action on. So one of the things that we decided to do is to actually generalize this concept of a workspace inside DevUI. So before I even going to show Chappie, I'm going to show the workspace which came from Chappie but has been generalized. So that's been in for a while in DevUI, and you can find it just under under workspace. So I have an application up and running, and you can see my workspace here. So all that it really is it just shows all the files in your workspace, apart now from what's in Target. You can actually code in here if you really want to, but that's not really the purpose of this. And then, I thought there's a question.
No, I was just going to say, so if I was really lazy and didn't want to fire up an IDE, I could just do that, but it wouldn't be quite as good an experience because that wasn't actually trying to replace the IDE.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and you can also go to the IDE. So if I click on this button here, I will actually open this file in my IDE. And we have this hook into a number of places in DevUI where you can click on something and it opens your IDE. I'm actually going to use this as an IDE as I demo, but like I said, it's not really the purpose.
Well, it could be for all those VI developers out there, right?
Yeah,
Although I think if you couldn't prize people away from VI for like, a really modern full-featured IDE, that Phillip's workspace might not be compelling enough.
No, definitely not. But it will show you an image if it's an image, and it will mark up, if it's like a markdown file, you have a preview, and this is some of the stuff that I want to show. So as part of DevUI, you now get this, and as part of a extension developer, you can now take part in this workspace by providing an action. So the action that I showed you there, for instance, is just a built-in action that allows a preview of a markdown file. So actually, before I do that, let me actually add the jokes extension. So the jokes extension is just this joke of an extension that I wrote way back when I did the DevUI. So I'm kind of just using that anytime that I need an extension to show what DevUI can do. So I've enhanced it now, and you can also see when I save here, it does the hard reload automatically. So it's busy hard reloading in the background, and now it's reloaded, right? So now I have the joke extension, I hope. So there's actually also now a filter. If you start typing, you'll see like this joke. So yeah, you can find, there's my joke extension, and this is what I've just shown how to do, take part in DevUI. But now I've also let the joke extension add stuff here. So now you'll see suddenly I have an action on this file, and I can replace all the O's with laugh out louds, for instance, as a joke. Or I can I can show my code in Markdown, or I can reverse it. Don't know why you would do that.
I was just about to ask, can you please provide a really good explanation of why this is useful?
Yeah. So in the context of jokes, what I'm trying to show you is the different ways in which you can take part. So, and I'll show the code just now, but as for instance, this one brings up a pop-up, right? Because when you take part in this, you don't write any UI code. You just say, this is what I want to do, and this is what the UI should do. So in this case, you'd say, I want the UI to show my response as code, so it's marked up as code in a pop-up, right? And I can save it now, which means I'll save this file. I can also change the path and things like this. If I do Markdown, I now have a split view, not a pop-up. So that's the other option. You can do a split view, and then you can do Markdown. Or you can just replace the existing content that's there, which means if I save now, this is my code. Or you can, let me just, before I save this by accident, or you can do something like this where you do an action, but all that you do is you show a notification. So that's the point of the jokes, is just to show the ways in which you can integrate. So from a code perspective, actually this I have to slideshow because I have some. You basically gonna provide a workspace action build items, because what you do is you provide a workspace action. It has a builder, so you can just say action.builder, and then you give it a label. That's what you see in the dropdown. Then you give it a function, and this is what will happen once I click something. And what you get in is an object that contains a unique action ID, and then the name, the file name, the full path, the actual content of the file, and the file type. And then you can do whatever you want to do with that and return it. And then you have your options of how you want to display it. So you can do nothing, so don't display anything. Then you can show a dialog like I showed, or you can replace the content, or you can do a split screen, or you can do the notification. And then you can also say what is the type of content that you apply. So raw would just be plain text, or if it's code, it will be marked up like you've seen. If it's marked down, it could be interpreted. If it's HTML, it could be interpreted, or if it's an image, it will show the image. You can also do patterns to filter on which files this action is applicable. So by default, it will just be on all files. In this case, this is just a regex, and then there's just this patterns object that has a bunch of regex in that's already kind of common cases, like any Java or any test or Markdown, stuff like that. So, but this could be your own custom regex.
Yeah, and is that just on the file name, or is that on the file name and the file contents?
No, just on the file name.
Cool. Because I'm just thinking for the packed extension, which Eric has the right T-shirt even for. But like for the packed extension, you probably want an action for the contract, which probably have a distinctive name, and you're sort of okay there, but they're not guaranteed to have a distinctive name. And then you might want action for tests that use packed, but that would be in the something in the file.
We can probably enhance this. It shouldn't be difficult to have a content filter as well. It should be possible to.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so cool. The reason I'm asking questions isn't, to do a live design review, but it's just because it's like, I think for any extension author, you look at this and you just go, oh, wow, there's so much I can do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is part of what I want to show today is that extension developers is going to start using this and Chappie and then have a bunch of requirements, but I don't want to suck these requirements out of my thumb.
Yeah.
I would rather let it,
And I should say as well, oh, sorry, Philip, that like if you're not an extension author, because probably like of the people watching it, only a small fraction are extension authors, but if you're just like a user, then what you should be doing is you should be harassing your extension authors to say, hey, why don't you have all these actions? Because look at how cool it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I even with Chappie, I've added some of my own extensions that I work on. I've added some use cases, but I don't want to do everything because I also want to give I want extension developers to own this. So even if I have an idea in another extension, I prefer if it comes from either a user or the extension developer. So that's the dev workspace. Let me just look at my notes quickly. Yeah, and I really wanted to give this as a background because, like I said, this originated from Chappie, and because of this, a lot of the things in Chappie is built on top of this. So now I want to talk about the Dev Assistant and Chappie, and why is there Assistant and Chappie? Why is it two things? So I think I might have this as well. Yeah. So if we look at how Quarkus is structured, we have the Quarkus core repository that has Quarkus core inside and a bunch of core extensions. And one of these extensions now is called the Assistant, but it's not, in my opinion, not really an extension. And I think we still need a name for whatever this is going to be, but it's not an extension in the sense that it's something that a user is going to add and they're going to have something in deployment and in runtime. I initially added this to Quarkus core, but there was some concern, so we put it in an extension just not to be in Quarkus core, even though it's not an extension. Chappie then is an extension that lives inside Quarkus, and it implements an interface that is in Assistant, because there's an interface in Assistant called Assistant that allows you to do Assistant type stuff. Chappie provides a concrete implementation of this. Inside the Assistant extension is also two build items. One build item allows you to take part in the dev log menu, which I'll show a bit later, and one allows you to take part in DevUI. And again, Chappie consumes these two build items that gets produced by somebody else. So it usually or typically gets produced by other extensions. As an example, OpenAPI, and I'll show that demo a bit later, will produce some of these build items. But we can't let OpenAPI be dependent on something in Quarkus. So we need something in core repository, which is not in core, but like this interface between the actual concrete implementation and the interface. And then any other extension, whether it's inside or outside of the core repository, can also then use this extension Assistant because it's available. Chappie itself produces some built items that it then also consumes because it has some built-in AI functions. When you add Chappie, you get those. So it comes from the Chappie extension. Now, if you are a user and you add Chappie to your class path, we don't want to pull in LangChain4j because your application itself might use LangChain4j. So to decouple those, Chappie itself is a separate process, or the Chappie server, what I call the Chappie server, is a separate process, which is just the Quarkus application that uses LangChain to go to the models. But now we have a HTTP protocol between these two, and there's no class path clash as such in terms of versions. Maybe this can be revisited if LangChain4j moves to the platform or the versioning gets managed by the platform. But until then, that's kind of the structure.
Or if we add OSGI.
Yeah, exactly. If we have something, yes, something that can load modules. Yeah, and then we at the moment we can do any OpenAI type protocols, so either the remote OpenAI or something like Podman Desktop or OpenShift AI, or we can do a Llama. But technically, we can actually do anything that LangChain4j can do, but that's all that's been built in at the moment. So if we zoom in a little bit into the Quarkus extension, like I said, in my opinion, it's not a traditional extension. It doesn't have a deployment and it doesn't have a runtime. It has the interfaces bits of an extension, which is deployment SPI, which contains build items, and runtime dev, which is fairly new, a new concept, but it gives you a runtime that is only available in dev mode. And that's where the interface lives. So extensions that want to use this system really never depend on the extension as in the deployment or the runtime. They just pull in these two jar files. Right. And then the Chappie extension then has, again, no runtime because this is a dev mode only, but it has a runtime dev and it has that contains the actual implementation and then the deployment that manages these build items.
This is like a prime example of how like introducing a layer of inheritance can solve all problems, right? You know, a layer of abstraction. That's what they teach you in computer science 101, right?
Yeah, it also creates a bunch of problems, but yeah.
Just say that.
I won't go into that, but yeah. So let's actually...
Like computer science 101 is introduce abstraction, and then computer science 201 is like, forget what we told you, remove the abstraction.
And here's all the problems with that.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll also add Chappie, which is somewhere here. Right, and this version, or anything above 1.2 is CR1, the current CR1 and up. So if you're not on 25, is it 325 that's out now, right? If you're not on Quarkus,
just about to be out, yeah.
Yeah, so Quarkus 25 CR1 and up, then use this version. Otherwise, 1.1. There's some bugs that needed work in both Quarkus and the extension. I'm demoing against 999 Snapshot because I might show you something at the end that I'm busy working on. So if we add Chappie, it should restart like it always does. Okay, and I now have an assistant card. And the first thing that I'll do is I'll configure it, and now you can choose your configuration. I'll start off with this one just to show that it can do more than one. Mine is kind of pre-configured, so if I selected it, uses my previous configuration that I had. But what I'm using is I'm using this OpenShift AI service that has a Granite model up and running. So I'll save this, And what I'll do as a start is, let me just quickly grab something. I'll simulate an exception.
Can you make your font about 16 times larger?
Yeah, I can try. I can also do this and then this so that we can see. So what I do here is yeah, I probably need a wget. Right, so I wget, and this is just an endpoint that exists in my current application that simulates an exception. And you can see here's my exception in my code. What I can do now is I can press H to get the normal menu item. And then you'll see I have under a new menu item, under Assistant, I can press A to get help. And if I press A, it started talking to the Quarkus Assistant. Now this might take a while because the Granite model is not the fastest one. In fact, any of the others I can't run on my machine. Anything that I run locally, I cannot demo because it just keeps on timing out and timing out. I had one success once with that, is it Alibaba, the Qwen model, but yeah, otherwise I can't demo anything. So I usually
like a request for new hardware.
I did, and yeah, that didn't go. That didn't help. This is hopefully when people use this, people with powerful machines will get all the bugs, because one of the things that I still need to do is
Is that just like revenge?
yeah, especially these other models need fine-tuning in the prompting, because behind all of this is just a prompt, and OpenAI works really well, but the others is not. The others I find always need some prompt tuning here or there, and that's where I'm kind of stuck, because I can't really do it locally. Okay, so this is my response. Just tell me what the exception was, do a small diff and what they proposed we should change, and then give me the actual fix, right? What I'll do next is I'll just go and don't wait too long for everything, and we'll go to OpenAI and save that. And now you'll see I'm against OpenAI. And what I'll do then is we'll simulate that error again.
So how does it save, like when you switched from OpenShift AI to OpenAI, it knew your API key and whatnot? Is that saved as part of the extension, or is it on the file system on your computer, or how does that work?
It's saved under home. I think there's a .Quarkus folder already in your home that does other things. I'm not too sure what it does, but it saves under there. And once you've configured one of them, it will remember the configuration, but if you remove it or change it, it will just use the other one. But you can always go back to your remembered ones, if that makes sense. So if you have OpenAI and you have OpenShift AI, like I have here, it will remember both, but you select which one you use. That's why mine is, I didn't have to configure them because it was configured before. But you can switch between them. So I've simulated the exception again. And actually, we want to simulate the exception online. So we want to do this to show you have a deep link from here now. So now it's your error page, and you now have this button. And then this deep links into the assistant page and kick off the process. So this should come back with the exact same kind of answer. So it does a diff. It gives me the new code, which is this part here. With the difference now is I can actually click save, and it'll override my file, and my bug is fixed if I'm happy with it. Or I can just copy it to my clipboard. I'm not going to do that because then I have to go fix it again for my demo. But it will save it. So that's the first thing that we have is exception help. Sometimes your exception help will come from a web page that you've hit, and sometimes you didn't get that far and you only have the console, but you can still kind of do What I want to show next, before I go on with the demo, is how you can take part in this. So one of the things that I've added in the joke extension, if I press H again, is I've added that you can tell a joke in your console. And if you press add, it should tell a joke. Why do programs prefer dark mode? Because light mode works. Right. Nice. And this code, just to show how that looks like. Yeah, so we've shown that. Yeah, so this code is this here. So this is one of the build items that's now available in that assistant in the Quarkus core repo. So as an extension developer, you can produce this assistant console build item. Now there's already a console build item that's in Quarkus core that allows you to do anything in console. What this does is it just gives you as an input. So this is exactly the same, the description, that's what you see. But then on the key, that's also the same. But then the function now will pass in the assistant, where the console function wouldn't do that, right? And now you have the assistant, and the assistant has this builder. We'll get into that a bit more later, but just a really basic one will just be a user message that says tell a funny joke. Right.
I guess we should be updating the extension maturity model to reference all this, shouldn't we? That it's one of those things that as an extensions don't have to do this, but your extension is cooler if it does.
Yes. This is very assistant specific, and the assistant documentation I've created, at least the first version of it. So there's some of this exists in the assistant documentation. We can probably just cross-reference it.
Yeah.
But we can definitely do that. Right. So so that's the first part of Chappie. Then let me just double check my slides. Yeah. Then I want to. Okay, so let me show you some other parts of Chappie before we get back to the slide. So I've shown the exception out and the configuration. The rest of Chappie actually comes from extensions that contribute to it. So I'll start off with jokes. There's a few ways that you can contribute to this. One way is to actually do something in the workspace. Like I said, the workspace originated from Chappie. So now if I go to workspace, I will also have Joke AI, which is a new item that comes from Chappie. And this now kind of tells a joke about your code. Why did the custom elf break up with his partner? Because it couldn't decide if it was up or down. Okay. So the point here is
that's the worst joke ever.
But the point is that it took the code as input and it made a joke about this code. If I would pass in to-do resource and tell a joke about that, it should have. Yeah, I don't know. It's always about breakup, but anyway, yeah, it's now to-do related, right?
Yeah. Bonus points for being on topic, but minus points for not being funny.
Yeah. So the way in which you can do this is also a little bit different, but also similar. So let me see the code for that. Right, so it's similar to the normal action builder that you have in DevUI, but you have another method now. You wouldn't call assistant, you wouldn't call function, you would call assistant function. And the difference is it's a by function, so you get the assistant and the normal parameters that you would have got. So the normal parameter is exactly the same, the file name, the path, the content, all of that. But you now get a handle on the assistant. And you don't have to worry about checking whether or not the assistant is configured and available and added and all of that. That's taken care of for you. So the menu item wouldn't pop up if the assistant isn't added and configured, right? So you don't have to code around that. You just need to say, if it is available and somebody did click it, what should happen? And in my case, I'm making a joke, right? And then you can see I use the the display function I've split, and I'm saying it should be markdown and it should only apply to Java source, right? So I use the normal workspace stuff that we've discussed.
Can you remind me what mechanism the normal joke uses to make the joke? I mean, obviously, this is the most important thing for everybody to understand.
Yes, so my joke extension uses some online joke service that does jokes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then there's an AI joke that does that you can pass context in, because the other one is just tell a joke. You can't pass stuff in and make it contextual. Maybe what I should have shown, which I didn't show, is the app that I'm demoing is the Normal To Do app. And the Normal To Do app actually has AI built into it. And that's back to the point that when you add AI to dev mode, you don't want to step on the toes of the AI of the app.
Yeah.
So I specifically use this app because now I can show that, yeah, this AI is still working. I can suggest something with AI. And this can be configured to be a different model totally than what I'm doing with DevUI. And then we can probably also show that other normal jokes is this is just what you're talking about now. Is where I just say, okay, tell a new joke. And this, I can't remember the exact service, but it has some jokes. So that's the one way, is to just take part in the assistant. And that's fairly easy, because you use pretty much the same way that you would have the workspace. I mean, you would have contributed to the workspace, except one change where you get the assistant.
So
the other way,
menu item, if you want to take this question after, but I saw in that menu item there was a generate tests thing. Is there an inverse if you are looking at a test to generate code from the test? Because that to me is a better approach. I would never say generate my tests. The tests are like your holy grail that stuff works.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. No, I would never have AI generate my test. That would be the one thing I would want to hand code, is the test.
Yeah. So we can definitely do the other way around. This is kind of one of the input that I want. So your first contribution could be exactly that. Now,
that was a good way to sneak that in, Philip.
Yeah. I'll wait for your PR. So and that could typically be at the same spot where this is, which is there's 4 built-in AI workspace contributions from Chappie, and that's where I said, like I said, Chappie also produces and consumes its own build items. So the build items from Assistant. One of them is add JavaDoc, so that's pretty basic. It just adds JavaDoc. And again, all that's behind this is a prompt, nothing more. It's a prompt that says, here's the code. This is, we add some context, like this is a Quarkus application, this is the Java version that I'm using, things like that. But then it will, and this one does a replace. So if I save now, it will actually update my actual code. The other cool one is actually this one. So let's say here, I want to say, we should let down be less, like say only 10% should be down. And then I can say, okay, complete my to-do. And now it will take this code and see where there's to-dos and put in code, and you can decide whether or not you like it. So this one isn't too bad. So it kind of, that's what I wanted. I want to change this to that. Right. So, and again, you can save it. The other one is you can just do an explain. So let's just choose something else. Explain this code. And this will come back as a markdown file. Right. So you can see how we use the existing workspace. So this will just explain, what this code does. And then the generate test is what we've spoken about, and which you're going to provide the generate class for, and then obviously use the pattern to only do this on tests. And this comes on as a pop-up, so I can look at this because it's separate code. It's separate, I'm not replacing the file that I have. And I can click save, and it will actually have a test case or copy. And I think that's it. The other one was the joke, right? Yeah. So these are the built-in ones that just comes with Chappie. And like I showed with joke, extensions can now also provide action items here. And that will be dynamic depending on which actions, which extensions is loaded. That will what's popping up here. The other way to take part in Chappie is to provide your own full screen, right? So if we go back here, you'll see there's these pink links in some places, like AI joke here. And here I can say, tell me a joke about why Quarkus is better than Spring Boot. Right, and then I have two goes just to show the two different class paths, because DevUI already allows an extension developer to either execute against the deployment class path or the runtime class path. So I have both just to show the code for both. And again, it's about relationships breaking up. But there you go. The other ones that's built in, and like I said, I've done some of these because I'm involved with some of these extensions. So I decided to add one for OpenAPI, for instance, that generate clients. Now, this is when I click on this whole page is about the assistant, right? So I can go here and say create a JavaScript client for my OpenAPI. This is doing it against the runtime class path because the OpenAPI schema document gets finalized in runtime. So some security things and some filters only kicks in on runtime. So the actual real OpenAPI schema documents at runtime. But now, yeah, it created some JavaScript and it tells me how to use it, right? And I have a few languages that you can try out just to generate some classes for it. You can do the same with GraphQL. I'm not going to demo this, but it does exactly the same, right? Except that it's using the GraphQL schema. To do that, let's go here. So full page integration. So this is the example. So again, if you are an extension developer and you have built a DevUI page already, this would be familiar to you. So to add something to a card, you add a page, but you now have this one, which is new, the assistant page builder. And the only reason why we want this to be new is so that we can know that this should be themed pink. It is assistant, and we need to make sure the assistant is available and only show it when it's available and configured. But the rest of this is the same. You can set the title and the component that's going to be the page. So this is normal DevUI. Then you have, like I said, you have two options in DevUI. You can either execute against the runtime class path or the deployment class path. The runtime class path means that you provide a JSON RPC service. This is fairly normal, but you now have the ability to inject this assistant. And the reason why it's optional is because we will only make it available when there's an assistant and the assistant is configured. But I'll show you later how when you code your UI, you can make sure that it never even gets to this error that you see here. But yeah, now I can use the assistant, so I can say, again, this is a basic one. I get the builder. I just say, tell me a funny joke and assist. I can also do it against the deployment class path. And this is, again, the way in which you do it in DevUI. You've got a build time action and build item where you would now add an assistant action. Previously, you would just add action. Now you'll add an assistant action. Again, the reason for this is because we will pass in the assistant. So this is a by function and not a normal function, just a single function. And then the parameters that obviously comes from your UI. I can now get this assistant and then again do something with it. Actually, you can see here one of the other options is variables. This is fairly normal if you've done any AI type code, that your user message can contain variables that you replace. So in this case, that drop down that I had was the variables. Yeah, so I pass this and this in as variables, right? Okay. What's next? Yeah. The other thing, let me actually demo this. The other thing that you can do is if you don't have a full page integration, this is actually wrong. This should say, just quickly doing my slides as we go, existing page integration.
And that's
So
why it wasn't presenter mode.
yeah, exactly. If you have an existing page and you just want to add a little bit of AI on an existing page, it's not going to be like the Open API one where the whole page is about generating this client. In this example, we have the database connection pool, and one of the things that you can do with database connection pool is you can get the import SQL for the current things in the database. Now, this is a very basic database, only one table, but I can still go and get this, and I can actually save it now and then save it as my insert SQL. So next time it loads up, it's just in my database. But what I can do now is I now have this button here, which is again the pink branded assistant button. And if I click on this, it will now go and ask for more data. So generate some more test data related to what I already have. So I just increase my my data. I could kind of do it again and increase it even more.
That's so cool.
So to do that, you obviously now need to do a bit more work as an extension developer. And if you look at the assistant state, so there's a new state in the UI called the assistant state. There's a few states in DevUI. For instance, the theme is a state. And all that a state is that it's something that's global. So everybody in DevUI can see the state. And if you subscribe to it or observe it, you will be notified when the state changes. And if the state change, a re-render could happen in your case if you wanted to. So in my case, in this example, I now import the assistant state, and then I can see whether or not it's configured. And based on that, decide whether or not I want to load something. Like, for instance, that button that says click here to generate more test data, that will be in an if like this. So if it weren't configured, if it was not available, it wouldn't have loaded that button. But as soon as that state changes, so somebody else changes the state, my button will re-render and suddenly that button will appear on the screen. So you have not available, and configured, because available means that there is an assistant, but it's not configured. So you could build something like, you can add the button there, but if the user clicks on it, go to the configure page or something like that. What we also have when you build your own screens is we have two components for DevUI, and there might be some more in the pipeline, but one is just an assistant button that's already themed, and one is that warning that you would see like this one here. So when you build it, you can just very easily add that to your AI bit on your page, because this will just be a component that you add. So far, so good. Any questions?
I don't think so, no, other than the ones that I've been peppering you with all the way through.
Yeah, our selfish questions, right? That because you see this, like the question I had about the tests and stuff. I have a talk that I do about test-driven development, and I use the JetBrains tools to generate code from the test. It would be very awesome to be able to just do everything in Quarkus, like as a VI developer.
Yeah. I just want to make sure I've shown everything I wanted to show here. This is kind of where we at with Chappie. It's available. You can use it. Extension developers can start using it. The documentation is done. Well, I don't know if documentation is ever done. There's documentation.
I was just going to say, the documentation is there.
Yeah, and I actually think there's new stuff in already that I figured out while I prepared for this that I missed. So, but yeah, have a look at this and see if this is enough for you to get going if you're an extension developer. So the future for this is, getting extension developers excited and hopefully getting more use cases to use this, because the more use cases we have, the more usable it is for the end user. Then one of the things that doesn't exist yet is how do we test this? Because I don't actually know how we test AI in general. It's something that maybe you guys know.
Eric has a talk, I think.
I'm doing it in September.
Okay, nice. So your second PR would be then the testing part to figure out how testing is going to work. But the idea would be to make it easy for extension developers to also add tests to their assistant code. The other thing that's actually been on the to-do list from the start, and there's some branches on my local machine that has some versions of this is doing RAG on our documentation and make that available for the extension. So when I'm an extension developer and I do something with Chappie, there should already be a RAG with my documentation available, so that it's just easy to make sure it happens, it enhance the prompt properly.
We should sync after this, because I have an application that does exactly that.
So your third PR would be that.
It requires a key to Tavili, though, because it has to do a Tavili search. So you need a key for that.
Yeah, see, so probably what we want to do is something that can run locally. It could be a dev service or something that start up your vector database, or something that has a pre-built for your version of Quarkus, a pre-built RAG already running, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So your ingestion part will kind of happen on release. So when a new version of Quarkus release, we will generate a new set of ingested documents and a Docker image with that already in. So then when it pulls it down as a dev service, it's just this vector store that's available and searchable under your extension artifact ID and group ID. So it's kind of automatically then, something like that. And once we have that, we will be able to actually chat with the documentation, which was also one of the first use cases that when I started Chappie, this is what I presented. I had this prototype that I can chat with documentation.
That's very cool.
And then, like I said, the fine tuning of the prompting, I think there's still a lot that needs to happen. Then maybe the RAG might make that less needed, especially for the non-OpenAI packets. But yeah. And then, how much time do we have? 10 minutes. So I wanted to show you something. So whilst doing Chappie, MCP came out, because this space moved so quickly. And then I was like, now I need to look at MCP. Should I look at MCP? Should we stop what we're doing? So at some point, I started looking at MCP. And if you're keen, if there's no questions and we have 10 minutes left, I can show you a demo that doesn't work.
Excellent, yes.
Of MCP.
I think you learn way more from demos that don't work than demos that do.
Yeah. So initially, the thought was, can Chappie become an MCP client and the extensions become an MCP server, something like that. But then I took a step back and just say, let's look at MCP and can we allow MCP tools like Goose or something, or Visual Studio or Claude or one of these, talk to your running application. And then once that's going, we can see how Chappie needs to change to also, or maybe not change, just add a feature to also take part in this. So when I started looking at, let me do this. When I started looking at MCP, this is kind of on a very high level what I realized. So let's say something like Goose will, and in this one we talk streamable HTTP, not the previous version. So Goose will post some JSON RPC to a server, and the server will respond with JSON RPC. Right. There's some methods that you have to implement. For an example, the resource list, which lists the resources that is available, or tools list that includes tools that's available. When I realized that, and I thought about what does DevUI do, DevUI has a browser that posts JSON RPC to a server, and the server responds with JSON RPC. And we have something that we call build time data, and part of the build time data is all the JSON RPC methods that's available so that we can validate this in the UI. So it just felt to me like we already have a whole bunch of stuff there that is very similar to what MCP is. So if we look at what DevUI does, is you have a browser that talks to WebSocket, and the WebSocket talks to something called the JSON RPC router. And the JSON RPC router is the one that does the most work, but it will route to the correct extension. So if we basically add a streamable HTTP interface, we can kind of do the same and hook in Goose or something like this. And what we get for free is the JSON RPC router take care of making sure that if it's a multi, it streams. If it's a uni, it's it runs on the correct. It runs correctly. If it's a POJO, if it does the serialization, it does all the class path stuff, whether it should run against the deployment class path or the runtime class path and the serialization between those. So it does a bunch of complex stuff under the covers already that we can get for free if this can work. What we don't have is, because we just code this browser part, it's not somebody that needs to understand it. We don't have descriptions, and we don't have descriptions on the methods or the parameters. So that's something that we need to add. So I then went ahead and did that and enhanced the DevUI to allow you to add a description. So for instance, here's the get loggers. So the DevUI log stream allows you to change the loggers. So that's this one here somewhere allows me to change the loggers. And this is a JSON RPC call that the browser needs to be able to build the screens so that you can change it. And it's also a JSON RPC call to actually change one of these. And so, yeah, if we go here now, let's make this smaller. This is now only on my machine. This doesn't exist on anywhere yet. But so this is where you'll be able to see. So I can already list all the JSON RPC methods. The difference now is that as an extension developer, you will have to add the description before this becomes available as an MCP endpoint as well. Otherwise, it will just be DevUI. You can actually play with it right here. So you can update a log level. So let's say io.quarkus, and we change it to debug. So this just tests this tool invocation basically, and we should see log level updated to debug, right? So we've done the actual update. Now, resources must still work. That doesn't work yet, but yeah, there's some static stuff that we can map to resources in DevUI. So back here, this is where the demo that doesn't work yet is going to kick in now. So if I start my Goose, you'll see a bunch of printouts because, like I said, I'm busy with this. But we've already made the handshake, because there's quite a handshake going on when you connect Goose. And you have to tell it all sorts of stuff about yourself and then notify and so on. But the handshake has happened. And I can then do something like this, get all the available loggers. And yeah, so it figured out that it should call this method, but then it bombs out. So that's where my demo doesn't work, because somewhere I'm not returning exactly what they want, because MCP has very specific structures in their return types that where DevUI is just return whatever you want to return. So I need to still map whatever the extension returned to just fit into their structure, because at the end, their structure still contains whatever you want, but it has some other things around it.
Whatever you want with a better disguise.
Yeah, it's got some wrapping stuff around it. I'm still trying to figure out why it's been done like this. It feels like I wouldn't have done it like this, because JSON RPC already gives you the ability to say, here's a method, here's its parameters. What MCP did is I said, the method is tools.call, and as a parameter, give it a method name, and another parameter is the parameters for the method name so it's kind of hiding the method in a method. What I would have done is probably just say that we have a few built-in methods, and anything else is your methods. Right? It's a tool call. But yeah, I probably don't know enough to know why it's been done like it's done. But yeah, the idea would be that any tool can now basically get access to anything that DevUI has access to. And we could then be at a point where an extension developer can write JSON RPC endpoints that just executes on MCP and not on DevUI. But it gives you some hooks into your running application. So this is still very POC, and I was hoping I'm going to be able to change a log level or something, but yeah, I didn't have time to get the demo working. And I think that is what I had. Yes.
Cool.
Prepared.
Yeah, I think this is going to be so useful. And as you say, it's, for the sort of the users, this maybe isn't directly relevant, but you can see how it has such a potential to make every single extension more usable and smarter and everything, which is cool.
Yeah, and it's probably start hounding your extension developers to incorporate it.
And it's probably worthwhile to also mention that Alexei has done some work in the past few months to make sure that we are even less or even more removed from any traces of being in your runtime artifact. Previously, there might have been a class that leaked into the runtime. It never gets called or executed. It's just the bytes is there. And theoretically, a user can probably create a new object of that type. Not that I think people do that, but they could have. But now that's all been cleaned up properly, and that runtime dev that I showed earlier will make sure that this only runs in dev mode. So an extension developer doesn't have to worry too much anymore about, am I going to leak into the production build, because it's now kind of impossible. So you can go nuts and add as many things as you want, and you won't break anything.
Nice. Cool. And I don't think we've got any questions. So any last questions from you, Eric?
I don't think so. My brain is spinning on where I can use this all over the place. I've got so many places where I can start playing with this when I have time, of course.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Always the caveat.
Yeah, add things to the to-do list has been done.
What we could potentially do is, and what I've done when we've launched DevUI is we just had this, I think it was somewhere on GitHub, just a list of ideas. And even if you just put your idea down there, then maybe I have time and I can start playing with it, or somebody else has time, but they know the ideas there. Because my problem is that I don't want to come up with all the ideas, because I think sometimes my idea is very specific to me. But I would have never done what you just suggested. Building code from tests. That's crazy talk.
The only way to do it.
Well, that's so the way you're doing it is the lazy man's approach. I don't care about the tests, just as long as my test dashboard's green, then we're good, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I find, and how do you agree with my philosophy? The tests are like your holy grail, and so if the generated code makes your tests green, then great.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, generating tests for code does have a place because it protects you against regressions. But I would normally do it the other way as well.
Yeah, so I think maybe what I'll do is I'll create this list where we can add ideas at least. As a start.
Yeah, and we've got Rostislav has asked if the next version of the DevUI is going to be written by AI tooling.
Yeah. Well, what is a little bit of inception is what I started thinking of is that if we have DevMCP going, then DevMCP will have access to JSON RPC calls that is doing AI calls. So I now have an AI that calls an AI.
What could
I
possibly
don't
go
know
wrong?
exactly. I don't know what's going to happen, and probably it's not something that we want. I'm not too sure, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Quark inception, quinception. Cool.
Cool.
I think that's all. Thank you very much. Yeah. Eric and I have both been like busily making notes all through. So yeah, lots to think about. And yeah, watch this space to see how it rolls out into the extensions.
Yeah.
Yep. Cheers all. See you. Thanks, Philip.
Bye.